J. Jameson Sr. is dead. Peter Parker is devastated. He's lost so many people in his life, and now he's by his Aunt May's side as she once again has to cope with the loss of yet another husband. Jay's son, J. Jonah Jameson, blames Peter for the death of his father. He angrily confronts the young man, and Peter is forced to admit to himself that his former employer is right. Even now, as a CEO of a successful multinational corporation, Peter didn't save the life of a man he cared about. After the funeral, Peter's friend Anna Maria asks why Jameson was so upset. Peter explains that when Jay got sick, a possible treatment was offered by a mysterious company called New You Technologies. Peter was reluctant to use an experimental treatment on somebody he cared so much about, but then a unique opportunity came along. An accident at Parker Industries' plant left a worker named Jerry badly injured and precariously close to death. So Peter paid for the man to get the experimental treatment. It was expensive, but it seemed worth it. The treatment worked. However, when Peter shook Jerry's hand, his spider sense went off. Concerned about this, Peter recommended to Jay and Aunt May that they decline the treatment, and they accepted his judgment. But, really, now that he's gone, Peter isn't sure if he did the right thing. He asks Anna what he should do, and she tells him they should find some answers. Peter agrees, and the two head out to Oklahoma, where Jerry is recovering. When they go to his house, the worker's wife says that he isn't home, but the two can tell she is lying. Nervously, she lets them inside, and explains that part of Jerry's treatment was that he had to take these regular medications. When they went away on a camping trip, he forgot them and got sick. New You officials ultimately took Jerry away, confiscated his things, and told his wife to stay quiet. He hasn't been heard from since. Concerned, they take Jerry's medicine and develop a plan. Peter goes to infiltrate New You headquarters while Anna Marie can see what she can learn from the medication. Inside New You, Peter sees a sprawling lab with suspicious tech and notes that his communication technology is being blocked. Peter finds a chamber containing a strange exoskeleton, and his spider sense once again sounds off. Peter comes to a horrible realization when he recognizes the eyes actually belonging to Jerry, and that they're moving. He's still alive. Suddenly, Miles Warren, the villain known as the Jackal, enters the room, and Peter realizes that his old enemy is behind this. The doctor flees and calls the security. Peter is surprised to see his old enemy, and a new one actually, in the form of a female Electro. Rhino explains that the Jackal is making the world right again, and that the doctor brought the rhinos to see his wife back from the dead. Peter argues that she's just a clone, which the female Electro finds insulting, as she is a clone too. She was killed by the original Electro, and when Miles resurrected her, she gained the villain's powers. However, a nice thing about a new villain is that they fall for all the old tricks. With the villains incapacitated, Peter goes off to find Dr. Warren, only to run into a very familiar face. Gwen Stacy greets Spider-Man, saying that it's been a while. Peter stares in disbelief at first, before reminding himself that she's got to be a clone, given everything that's happened around here. Except all the new clones have been setting off Peter's spider sense, and this one isn't. As Peter contemplates the possibility that Gwen is real, he is suddenly hit by something metal, and it seems Dr. Octavius has returned. Gwen remembers being kidnapped by the Green Goblin. She remembers him revealing that Peter Parker, the man she loves, is Spider-Man. She remembers crying because that means he never told her that he was the man that helped kill her dad. She remembers being knocked off that bridge. She remembers dying. Then she woke up in a strange lab. A masked figure explains that she died many years ago on that bridge. But she's not a clone. That's actually happened to her more than once already. This Gwen Stacy is very real. A reanimation based not on an old blood sample like the other clones, but Gwen's remains. Unlike the other clones, this Gwen remembers everything. But all that is no longer important. She has a new life now, a new chance, and all she has to do is take a pill to live. Gwen is reluctant to trust this stranger, which he understands, so he brings her to see someone. Her father also returned to life. Happy to see one another, father and daughter embrace, and with her dad's reassurances, Gwen agrees to take the pill. The masked figure smiles. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of Clone Conspiracy #1. So I didn't really want to review this comic. As I've said quite recently in another better Spider-Man review, the latest direction for Spider-Man kind of left me largely uninterested, which is why I've been paying more attention to Miles lately. But when I heard what was going down in this issue, well, I really couldn't pass it up. In light of the bombshell dropping here and the direction the review is about to take, I will make a special effort to try and be fair about this one. I'm going to try and do my best not to review this as a fan of Spider-Man, but as an honest critic. But let's make no mistake, I am a fan of Spider-Man. More than any other character, I've read a huge chunk of his history, and I know this character very well. But I'm going to try and set all that aside and review this comic fairly and with consideration to both sides of the fence. Those who like this comic, and those who don't. Let's start with the good. What works in this comic works very well. I love Peter's fight with Rhino and Electro. That's classic Spider-Man right there. He banters with them, jumps around a bunch, and uses the environment around him to win the fight in a rather clever way. That's the sort of combat Spider-Man is famous for, and it is just great. I also like the friendship between Peter and Anna Maria. Anna is easily on Peter's level in terms of intellect, so they make a lot of sense as friends and it works. I can also get why, given how Anna fell in love with Otto and Peter's body, that hasn't really blossomed into a romance. Again, I kind of approve. It's a healthy relationship based more on shared respect than passion, and it works well. The art in both the main and backup story is also perfect. Jim Chung, Ron Franz, and everyone else on the art team did great work here. Really, it's the best part of the comic. What's left of Jerry looks all creepy and terrifying. I love that part. And you get a great sense of emotion in the faces throughout the comic. And yes, like I said, the action was great. It was well drawn and properly telegraphed. The art team as a whole deserves a lot of praise for their work here, especially in the backup story, which not only nicely emulates the Silver Age comics that it's referring to, but it also gives a solid modern feel as well. But I kind of wish they were drawing something better. Because let's get into the cons. Okay. I really need you to pay attention to this part. Are you listening? Are you sitting down? Are you ready? Okay, good. God damn it, do I hate this thing. I don't even know where to begin. So they're doing another clone story. Personally, that's already the first in a long line of terrible ideas being rolled along here. Yes, it is possible, in spite of the relative mess the original Clone Saga kind of eventually became, it's possible to make a good clone story. I've seen it done before. But look, Dan Slott can be a good writer. He's done some good stuff in the past, like Big Time, Spider Island, Superior Spider-Man, and my personal favorite out of his writings, Renew Your Vows. Which, by the way, is coming back in November. Kinda looking forward to that, although it doesn't have Dan Slott writing it, so make of that what you will. Still looking forward to it, though. However, and I don't mean to offend, but there's no way around this, I don't really think he's nearly good enough to pull this off. He doesn't have the chops to overcome people's expectations, especially if you're going to do something big and controversial like bring back Gwen Stacy. And knowing his writing, I just don't think he's up to this task. Now, some of you are definitely going to assume that part of my big problem with this comic is that I think the death of Gwen Stacy is the most importantest story in the world, and how dare they ruin her memory? No. Let's be real. Gwen was already a pretty boring character. She was a romantic interest created in the early days of Spider-Man to make sure everyone knew that this young man jumping around in colorful tights had a very serious case of the not being gay. The only real moment her character retrospectively gained any value was when somebody not only decided to kill her off, but to do it in a way that cemented the Green Goblin as Spider-Man's enemy and affirmed everything that Spider-Man stood for. In that way, Gwen has come to be kind of this good character. She represents an early innocence to Peter and why he chooses to be a hero in spite of having made mistakes in the past. That's great. I really like all that stuff. So, all that being said, the death of Gwen Stacy is a monumentally important moment in Spider-Man history, and the best, smartest thing to do would be to just leave the poor girl alone. But that ship sailed a long, long time ago. That didn't start here. Gwen Stacy's memory was ruined, if you can even call it that, considering she's a fictional character. But if you were to say it was ruined, that happened way before this story was ever even conceived. Bringing her back, even after having the balls to retcon her into hating Peter's guts right before she died, which I understand if that upsets you, by the way. But it's really a drop in the bucket when you think about all the clone business that's happened already, and how Gwen, I think, slept with Norman Osborn at some point. Yeah, when you get right down to it, bringing back Gwen Stacy, that whole aspect of the story could be a lot worse. I don't really have a problem with that aspect of the comic. Bringing her back is okay, if done properly. Although believe me, I understand if that's why you hate it. They do this so much, and honestly, I was thinking, it's not so much comic book deaths that bother me, it's comic book resurrections. It's one thing to kill off a character, sometimes you need to do that to raise the stakes or to make a danger feel real. But bringing her back is rarely done well and rarely done right. Sometimes it is. I don't think this is one of those times. Rather, my problem with Clone Conspiracy is a small group of other problems lying under the hood of this story that coalesce into a big pile of turd. So, we kick things off with the funeral, and that's supposed to be tragic. I say it's supposed to because this story is about clones posing a very potential, real, permanent cure for death. An idea that could work, even pairing off this death with this whole idea of resurrection. That's actually kind of smart. And I do like certain aspects of this idea. It means that people like Rhino are firmly going to be on the Jackal's side. A way of getting, say, Dr. Octavius back into the mix after all the Superior Spider-Man stuff. It's also kind of an interesting idea as a whole, using clones as medical treatment. In fact, I'm actually okay with the first chunk of this story. It's the backup story that really has me worried, and the part that I find in particular unravels everything, which is why I also included it in this recap. See, it basically retcons the death of Gwen Stacy. That's stupid. But it also goes out of its way to say Gwen isn't a clone, she's a reanimation. What difference is that? How is a preserved blood sample meaningfully different than a person's remains? It isn't. That makes no sense. It's all DNA, guys. And at least the blood was taken from Gwen when she was still alive. Whatever remains of her are just dead and dying cells. It comes across as incredibly pathetic and a desperate way to not only distinguish yourself from the multiple occasions Gwen has already been cloned, but so they can argue, no, she's not a clone, she's a reanimation. And she's not even really a reanimation. The way I would think of reanimation would be taking, like, her dead body and resurrecting it somehow, like Frankenstein. But that's not what they said they did. They said they took DNA from her body and made a clone. She's a clone. There is no basis in science or reality to state otherwise. Look, I get we have to use suspension of disbelief in a story with a guy who has spider powers and crazy magical web fluid, but this is way too far. This is using science to justify a major point in the plot, but the very science you're referring to doesn't support this whatsoever. It's ridiculous on a level I just can't accept. I've seen other reviewers whose judgment I'm seriously calling into question right now, calling this story daring and bold. You're going to have to explain to me how a story too afraid to call a clone, because of a fear of a very deserved fan backlash they will get for this totally unoriginal idea, is somehow daring. It is the opposite of daring. It is weak and small and cowardly. Meanwhile, we already have at least 2 other Gwen Stacys running around right now, one of which I really like and the other which feels totally forced to begin with. So what's up with that? Why the hell would we possibly need 3? Why is Gwen Stacy so f***ing important? Like, who cares about her enough that they want her back, but not enough that they don't care what they do to this character to bring her back? It is so bad of an idea at this point. Given how many times they've done this before, and how there's already a couple Gwen Stacys out there, I feel that bringing back Uncle Ben would have been more interesting. That would have been daring and bold. Think about it. This is a slightly more original idea, for one thing, and it would be really significant. Aunt May just lost her second husband, so for her first one coming back from the dead, after all those years, would mean a major shift in the status quo. That could at least be interesting and emotionally real. To be honest, they shouldn't bring either of them back, but I'm just saying even that would have been better than this. I assume more twists are on the way that can maybe make this story more worthwhile, but I'll be honest, I see no way for this to end well. If the story ends tragically rather than the permanent return of Gwen Stacy, all of this is going to culminate with more excuses for Peter Parker to act miserable, to be alone, and to generally have more of the same boring nonsense we've been getting out of Spider-Man these days. Even the way Peter grieves in this comic for Jay feels quite self-centered. He thinks about all the people he's lost and how hard it is for him to see Aunt May suffer. It always seems to be about him, and in this fabulous, amazing life that any of us would love to have, somehow nobody suffers more than Peter Parker. However, I've heard leaks suggest that this is actually the permanent return of Gwen Stacy, and that's way worse. Like, we've already got plenty of Gwen Stacys out there, as I've said, and bringing her back feels like such a waste of time. It also invalidates everything about her death. Nobody else has thought about this? You know, there's a perfectly good love interest in Iron Man's story that, would that be interesting? No? She could still work for Iron Man and be a part of Peter's life. No? Can't do that for some reason? Mary Jane's gonna be very popular next year. Just throwing that out there. By the way, a lot of these complaints I would consider pretty major problems with this story. I don't really think any of this really qualifies as nitpicking, as that would include stuff like, why didn't Peter investigate this company before Jay died? Or how did they get Captain Stacy's DNA before he died? Who would have known that would have been important to get? But like I said, that problem is much more typical in a story, and it doesn't really bother me as much as these bigger problems here. I just want to point those things out because that's nitpicking, but the stuff about, say, her being a clone versus a reanimation, that's much more significant to the main plot and where the bigger problem lies. Also, last time Peter met a Gwen Stacy clone, they actually realized they had both kind of moved on, grew up, and were different people now. You know, it's like how relationships evolve over time, so in some ways, Peter Parker should have moved on. I just don't understand the point of bringing her back. I guess we're just ignoring all of this because Gwen is popular on Tumblr now? I don't care if you like Gwen Stacy. Here's a great comic featuring her in the role of Spider-Man and Peter Parker as the tragic and dead love interest. It's great. Read that! Can we not derail Spider-Man to appease a small segment of the fan base? Like, really? This is what's happening? F that. F this comic. Oh, and if you think that masked figure at the end of this comic was interesting, think again. See how Norman Osborn smiles at the beginning of this story? See how the masked figure smiles at the end? Yes, I'm saying it here and now, that's the Green Goblin. He's behind all of this. Because of course he's behind all of this. To do anything else would require original thought. Oh, I'm sorry, Marvel, did I just figure out a big plot twist? That's a shame. Too bad you dropped that subtle hint because I had a feeling you were going to do this anyways. After all, that would be super obvious, especially given what went down in Clone Saga, and besides, who else but Norman Osborn could possibly engineer something so convoluted and crazy? I hope I'm wrong about it, but I bet you I won't be. Because this comic feels soulless. I'm not sure how much of this is Dan Slott's idea and how much Marvel is pushing Gwen Stacy back into the picture, but I have a feeling like it's the latter. My impression is that this is a cold, calculated maneuver to make some waves, sell some comics, and bring back a character gaining popularity lately in spite of the disastrous long-term implications of doing this and the lack of a proper creative idea behind the story other than let's bring back Gwen. So that's my review. As you can tell, being calm, measured, and fair kind of went out the window at some point, but I just can't. This comic was doing great for a while until the ending and the backup story, but it just feels right out there in the increasingly long line of disastrous Spider-Man comics that are well made but fundamentally flawed. There are good aspects to this comic, and I look forward to more of that, but the more I look into this story and the more I think about it, the less I like this thing. And we're only one issue in. I will probably cover this whole mess, not because I liked or recommended this comic, quite the opposite. I want to take this down. I've seen reviews give this thing a 10 out of 10. I've seen a lot of fans saying that they like it. I get where everyone's coming from, I really do. There are some good ideas here and the potential for a great story. But I hated it. I'm looking at the other reviews and fan reactions. Well, I'm not alone in hating this, but I do feel like I'm in the minority. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of backlash against me expressing my honest opinions, and some of you are going to write this all off as the rantings of a disgruntled fanboy. That last part may very well be true, though I'd like to point out traditionally I seem to resist those urges if you look at how, say, I covered the whole Hydra Cap thing. I think this story is making some giant mistakes, and I have a feeling things are only going to get worse from here. I hope I'm wrong, Because right now I'm looking back at the Clone Saga with a lot more affection than I used to, and I can't think of a worse insult regarding clone conspiracy. So, yes, I hope you liked this video. I tried to make it fair, I really did. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments section below. And just like that, I throw this metaphorical stick of dynamite towards the Spider-Man fanbase and run away to a safe distance, eager to see what the reaction will be. I am sorry for the rant. I knew it was coming the second I heard about the retcon. I hope you guys liked the video just the same. And stay tuned for more issues of Clone Conspiracy as I gradually suffer a complete and utter mental breakdown. Finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.
They were in his car and he wanted more. She sat in the waitress, just wear it out. So, you know that no means no. But he went on, this was his fault. She smiled at him while she got through. Don't you know that no means no? She got a job and everything.